Shields up, Iron Breakers. Welcome back to another episode of Kast. And today I'm here with community manager. I believe your name is Hamish. I don't know how to pronounce it. Hamish?
Hamish, you got it right the second time.
Yeah. Hamish, okay. Hamish from Fellowship. Now, this is a game that I already made my reaction video to. I saw the gameplay reveal that you guys did for the game, and this is something that interests me mostly because back in my World of Warcraft days, my most liked thing about that game is Mythic Plus. I've always enjoyed Mythic Plus. I think it's enough fun. And when I looked at your game, it just seems like it's Mythic Plus without any of the other grinds, and it is awesome. But first, please introduce yourself because my introduction was terrible. I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine. I'm Hamish. I'm working as the community director over here at Chief Rebel. I've been here for about a year, and I've just kind of been itching to be able to talk about Fellowship. It's been a long time coming. For me, coming here, it was really an easy decision for me to come and work here when I saw what the team were working on, because I had been at Ubisoft for 10 years before that. I had a little stint at Blizzard.
So you've worked at Blizzard as well?
Yes, back in 2011, 2013, we can kind of unpack all of that. So that was a really interesting time. You can probably tell that I'm not from around here, but I'm from New Zealand, so a long way from home. Which is,
I thought it was going to be Australia. I don't know how close is New Zealand to Australia. They're pretty close, though, right? Is that not a thing, or is
kind of close?
Look at this. This is my hat. This is Australian Outback hat. I love it. Sorry.
There you go. It's kind of close. I mean, to fly from New Zealand to Australia, you're looking at a minimum 3-hour flight. So it's not across the bridge, but it's close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess one of the first things that I would like to know about, at least, is this team that you guys got going, because I never heard of your team before, Chief Rebel. So tell me a little bit about that. Yeah,
so the studio has been going for like 5 years now, and we've been obviously very, very quiet. I remember when I was working at other places, and I was like, Chief Rebel, I know a guy that works there. Why don't I know anything about what they're working on? They're being very quiet. I wonder what they're doing. And all I could see was that they were doing a stylized game, and that was about it. And I was like, okay, well, those are the kind of games that I love. What's going on there? And I remember just thinking, like, I wish I knew. And the good thing was, one of the guys who was one of the original people here at the studio, I'd actually worked with him when I first moved to Sweden in 2013 at Massive. So back when I was working on The Division. And yeah, I had lunch with him, and yeah, that's when I was kind of told about what was going on here. And yeah, I was like, sign me up, let's go do this thing.
So this I feel like is a relatively small team, right? That's one of the things that I pointed out in my video when I see, okay, so the game director is also the CEO. This can't be a big team, right? Because these roles don't usually overlap like this on large teams.
Yes, that was one of the things I found really attractive about the studio. I mean, I've worked at big places before, but I also really just love being on small teams where you get to do a bit of everything. And I remember the first day I was here, Axel, who's our CEO, and he's the game director. He was like, "Oh, let's go play test the game," and I was like, "That's different."
CEO just say, hey, let's go play the game. It's like, there's even this concept now, and with a lot of gamers, that's like, man, a lot of developers nowadays don't even play their video games, and you can kind of tell when you start like playing their game, and it's like, wow, this just, there's a lot of grinding in here that's not particularly fun or interesting, or certain things that as you play a game, you instantly can tell, oh, this looks good, this does not. So it's very refreshing to hear that the CEO is just like, hey guys, let's just go play the game for a little bit and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, we had a moment before because I was prepping for this podcast. I asked you, is there a few things you want to know? Because I want to make sure that I get some specific knowledge if we need it. And I wrote a few things to Axel, and I was like, Axel, you need to respond to my messages. Stop balancing the game, please, because I need to talk to you about this. And he's like, no, I'm deep in the end game balancing for one of our casters. And I was like, just take 10 minutes. I need this from you. But it's really cool. It is really cool that that all across the organization we have basically everyone working to put this game together. But yeah, we're a small team. We're so I think 35 people, maybe 40. No, we're less than 40. We're about 35 people here. So a very, very small team. It's pretty cool.
One of the cool things about that is I always find that like smaller teams are a little bit more agile. So like when something's wrong, they can like push out patches really, really fast, which I think is a good thing. So that to me, I kind of see the industry shifting a lot from these big monolithic, AAA titles to just having these more AA kind of titles that come in and kind of like really take people by surprise, which has been something that I've definitely noticed this year.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I think we're certainly afforded a certain level of agility that
Yeah.
you can't have in a big organization. That's not to say that big organizations are bad. Like,
Yeah.
I've worked places where you can do things that we now can't do. So we have to be creative and find different ways of doing things. But I certainly love that we can move quickly and be very direct. It's fun, but sometimes it's like you got to scramble and do something over here and something over there, and
Yeah.
it's definitely different.
So you guys put out like a 5-minute video that showcased gameplay, which was the first thing that I looked at, and I was like, I like the art style. I like kind of like the overall pitch, but I want to give you the chance to pitch the game yourself. So like, give us the overall like elevator pitch of what you guys see Fellowship being.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, well, we going through that process of making that trailer, I'll kind of let you in on a little bit of the behind the scenes. We one of the things we were talking about is how do we communicate what our game is, and we kind of got stuck in this trap of, I guess, more describing what our game isn't. And we were like, it's a bit of this, a bit of that, and a bit of that. We've always said that we've taken elements from MOBAs and clearly MMOs and ARPGs, and we're trying to bring people into this experience, which is clearly an end game dungeon experience. But that's a really long way to say something. And so we landed on this idea of what can we call it? And we ended up calling it a MODA, like a multiplayer online dungeon adventure, which I have to like kind of go through slowly because I'm still getting used to it. But it is new. Like there are a lot of kind of, yes, things that players will expect, but there's a bunch of curveballs that I think we're excited to throw into the mix. I don't know if you've been following along with what we've been putting out on TikTok. I've just started dropping some like little hero guides for people.
I saw that I saw on Twitter, I think, that you guys were saying that you posted a thing on TikTok, but the thing is I'm very anti TikTok. I don't like that platform because I feel like it's a little bit, I understand why people post on it and all that, but it's like the attention span of it and the effect that it has. I'm like, I'm not a big fan of short form content. I want to consume big chunks of video.
Well, I promise I'll make you some big chunky ones.
Okay.
But the thing, so I've put out 2 videos already. So we've done a quick preview of what was the first one I did?
It was one for a caster. That one I know.
Yeah, so Addons, our fire mage. I did that, and there's some familiar things in there, but maybe a little slightly different take. There's Vigor, the healer that I put up yesterday. That's probably familiar to a lot of people. I found that one the most familiar when I joined, but I had a bit of a struggle this morning when I created a video for Mako, who's our kind of hybrid melee fighter tank who doesn't have any weapons. She's using a system that is inspired by a bunch of different things. So that's probably the curveball angle that I'm trying to articulate here, is that there's familiar things, but some, like a little bit of spice in there on some other things. So Mako, when I've tried to explain it to people, I play a lot of Dota, so there's some Invoker-esque combo building things that you have to execute, and there's some inspiration that we've taken from like fighting games, but also when Axel and I were first talking about the execution of Mako, we were like, we want it to feel rhythmic and different and almost musical. Anyway, difficult to
Yeah.
explain. So I'm really excited to see what you think of that, because I think it's a little bit
Yeah,
different.
it's so with the whole notion of MODA, the multiplayer online dungeon adventure. I was like, okay, so I can see the MMO aspects, I can see the ARPG aspects, I get that, but then you guys also talk about and MOBA. Now you just brought up the whole thing about how it's about a rhythm and whatnot of that specific character for MOBA, but it's like I'm expecting more things from the MOBA side of things. Like, well, what are you guys talking about when you say that this also includes stuff from MOBAs?
I mean, just in the way that players are going to interact with the game at a macro level as well, all sorts of different ways. That's a difficult thing to answer without spoiling kind of future things. I will say there's no towers. There's nothing, anything like that. But I think the minute-to-minute combat is something that reminds me of a fusion between MMOs and MOBAs. Some of the heroes and skills feel to me paced like MOBAs, if that makes sense.
Okay.
There's some things in there that I would kind of consider skill shots. But yeah, I think I'd probably need one of the designers to come in here and speak specifically about what they've taken inspiration from. But that's just my experience.
Yeah.
There's moments when I'm playing, Dota, because that's my favorite MOBA, and I'm like, okay, I can see how that's where that
Somewhat
inspiration
similar
come
to,
from.
to Fellowship. Yeah. So
Definitely.
one of the things that you mentioned in that video as well is that this is going to be a premium title. Now, I'm not sure how much you guys are prepared to talk about in terms of like business model and all of that stuff, but that is definitely one of the biggest questions that I would have. And naturally, that's going to be one of the biggest things for the community is what is the business model? What do you mean by premium title, et cetera, et cetera? Any details that you can give us on that?
I mean, I can give you some details, but we haven't fully nailed it down ourselves. I can kind of tell you what it's not. It's not free to play. It's not.
Okay.
It's not subscription based. There will be a cost at launch. We haven't nailed down exactly what that will be, but we really want to make sure that it's low barrier to entry because for an online multiplayer game we need players. We need a lot of players, so we need to make sure that offer is attractive to people, right? Especially that we're asking people to, find groups, queue up, that sort of thing. That's a requirement that we have. So we're very aware that, we need a really healthy player base. But I don't know what the cost will be. We're looking to launch next year. So, as we kind of get through this alpha that's coming really soon, there'll definitely be some decisions made, and hopefully we can communicate those out soon.
Because it almost feels like nowadays this type of game, a lot of people, one of the things that I've noticed, for instance, we recently had the whole thing with Concord, which is going the route of also being a premium game, not free to play. And in a very surprising twist for me personally, a lot of people are like, no, it needs to be free to play. So a lot of people are expecting these titles to be free to play, which to me personally, I'm of the exact opposite opinion. I'm like, no, I don't mind paying for a game because that way it's like you already have my money, so you don't really have a reason to like get engagement out of me almost because like you already have it. So now just like give me fun times. That's it. Whereas it feels like a lot of time with a lot of free to play games, they're just like, no, you haven't paid us, so now you're going to pay us in time. We're going to force you to grind over and over and over. And that's usually my biggest concern. But yeah, I guess you guys haven't nailed that stuff down. One of the big questions that I would ask is loot boxes. Is that something that you guys are considering? Because that is definitely
I haven't heard, honestly, I haven't heard anything about loot boxes. So
okay.
I totally understand your reaction to that. I've been in the industry long enough to know exactly how people feel about them, myself included. I don't know about that one.
So,
but
you guys say multiplayer online dungeon adventure. Another thing is it always online, or is there some type of peer-to-peer that people can do, or is it going to be like your servers?
That's a good question. I only know that we will be always online.
Okay.
That's not to say that I don't know what could be
the
possible in the future.
And,
right. We had an interesting question on our Discord. I think it was yesterday. They're like, in the future, is there a possibility to do, like local stuff? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, we're a lot of us here in the studio are old enough to remember LAN parties. So I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, we can. I have a very romantic view of LAN parties and you know, those times in my youth, and you know, who knows if
I
if that's
think
something.
the
But
the biggest issue with something like that is then to maintain the integrity of the save files. Obviously, as they go back to the server, that's that's why you want the always online, especially because you guys are doing like
absolutely.
competitive stuff and all of that. But what about potentially AI bots? Is that something that you guys are considering just in case? Because there are a lot of players that, you know, they have this social anxiety thing that they're like, oh, I just want to play by myself. And sometimes
Yeah.
even playing by themselves, just kind of like learning the ropes, then they feel a little bit more comfortable to jump in and like actually get in touch with other players and learn that way. Or you guys are like, no, this is going to be just other players and that's what it is.
I mean, right now, yes. Since we're a small team, we have to focus on making the game
Yeah.
like
The core
fun and
experience.
yeah, we have to make it tight and fun in the fastest way possible, right? So do I think bots are like a great idea? Absolutely. Like that would be super cool. It's not something that we have. I don't know if it's something that we could have in the future. But you bring up a really good point. I think we obviously haven't had people even have their hands on with the game yet, but it's since our game is very much focused on one activity. One of the things we're focusing on is how do we bring players from if they've never tried a game like this,
Yeah.
you know, if they've never gotten to an end game dungeon experience, you know, which is usually locked behind either leveling or, you know, financial reasons. I don't know. A lot of people have reasons why they haven't gotten to that place, or time, right?
Yeah.
It's we want to make sure that players aren't, you know, thrown straight out of the frying pan and into the fire. They need some way to onboard into the game in a friendly way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So people will find out in the alpha, they'll see that we have some systems in there. One of the things that I think's kind of cool is we've locked a few, let's say, I don't want to say veteran mechanics from that kind of dungeoneering experience, but things that maybe players might get overwhelmed with at first, like having to interrupt enemy spell casts or, you know, threat management and that sort of stuff for tanks. We have some Ascensions, which we call them, which you won't unlock until after your first run. So you basically opt in to those mechanics. So let's say you and I are sitting down and we've never played Fellowship before, and I can be like, "Oh, do you want a tank?"
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
okay,
That's
right?
always the answer. If somebody asks me if
Okay,
I
all
want,
right.
yes, absolutely. I'm the tank.
So let's go through hypothetically how that works. We don't have any Ascensions or curses available to you from the start.
Did you say curses?
Yes.
Ascensions or curses? Okay.
Yeah. And people will kind of see exactly how deep that goes in the alpha.
The alpha?
But just at a basic level, we don't have any Ascensions or curses. Then, after we've finished our first dungeon, I can be like, oh, we have this Ascension now available to us. Do you want to start playing with the ability to interrupt spell casts? Because the first time we played it, you couldn't do that. And the spells weren't as punishing. They weren't doing as much damage. But at least you kind of saw them. But they were they're uninterruptible. The second time we play through, we can turn that on. And then suddenly those
Those spells are going to hit harder.
casts, they're going to hit harder. Exactly. So you're going to quickly realize, oh, I've got this new thing to manage. I have an interrupt ability, and I'm going to be punished if I don't figure out when to use it. And we're going to have to communicate. We're going to have to cycle who's doing interrupts and that sort of thing.
Ooh, cycling interrupts. Now that is sounding much more advanced. Because
Yeah,
like it's
but-
one thing. It's one thing to interrupt, but cycling interrupts, especially if you're playing in a pug. Like, you know, for people that aren't familiar with it, it requires some communication. Because at least for me, because, you know, back in the day, I was always like, the ability that I have on the number one skill as a tank, it was interrupt. I was just like, you know, I do all the other things, and the second I see a spell, interrupt. And if you
I got this.
if you have to cycle interrupts, it's like, now I have to actually think about this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's a sliding scale, right?
Yeah.
You know, the first time you do it and the difficulties that you're playing on, it won't really matter who does the interrupt, and you'll be okay. If you miss some, it'll be fine. But obviously, as you start, cranking up the difficulty and scaling up, that communication's going to hit a critical point. And on the other end of the scale, you will reach a point where it becomes capped out. You can't reach another difficulty. You've reached the maximum difficulty that you can. But we want to make sure that through that, people are drip-fed those things. So yeah, for example, it's interrupts. We also have in there that threat management is opt-in as well. So
if somebody doesn't opt in the threat management, does that mean that if I'm the tank, the mobs just target me all the time? That's it? Even if my rotation sucks?
Even if your rotation sucks, but as long as you do at least 1 point of damage, you will have aggro. Yeah.
Okay, so you have magnetic aggro just for 1 point of damage. So I'm assuming then that the moment I start opting into these things, you're going to reward me with more things as well. Because otherwise, I'm just making everything harder for myself at no gain, right? There needs to be some kind of balancing there.
Definitely. I don't exactly recall the intricacies of what affects what, and we'd need one of the designers in here. But I can recall, and again, internet, do not quote me on exactly this, but I can give you the design principle behind it. So if you opt into an Ascension, you will basically increase either the item level or like the amount of variables on an item. And I can't remember which is which because we have difficulty, so like the level of the dungeon. We have the Ascensions, which is like the things you opt into. And then we have Curses, which is another opt-in thing that will cause various effects to happen, whether that's fireballs coming down from the sky or blood shards exploding from enemies that, damaged. You have, and again, don't quote me on this.
I would assume that Curses is like a group-wide thing, but does this mean that aggro management and all this stuff is also a decision you need to make as a group, or can the tank just decide, actually, I don't want to deal with aggro?
No, it's group-wide. So the group leader... It's a group-wide,
yeah. Okay, so that makes way more sense. Now I understand. Because I was thinking to myself, like, I mean, how's this going to work if I'm just a tank? Why would I, opt to gimp myself with all of these mechanics? So yeah, it's a group-wide decision. That makes way more sense because that way everybody gets more rewarded. Yeah.
Yeah, so... When you play the alpha, what you'll see happen is you will have a screen, like basically when you're starting a dungeon. You'll select the dungeon, you'll select the difficulty, which will, I think that scales the item level. Again, don't quote me on this. You'll check it. It'll, scale up you get. Then Ascensions will scale up something else, either the different slots that are available from the loot. So, whether it's chest pieces or shoulder pieces or rings or that sort of thing. And you'll have Curses, which will, again, give...
curses are like affixes. Affixes right now, and again, I'm sorry to bring it up again, but it's like affixes in World of Warcraft, where it's like you get something like, this week trash deals more damage, or next week bosses deal more damage, or some other mechanic like sanguine, where things explode. And now there's blood in the ground. If you stand in it, the puddle expands and everybody dies. So it's like chaotic mechanics that require you to be more attentive as to maybe how you tank or how you deal damage, maybe don't AoE single target, so on and so forth, to kind of like keep things varied. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also hear probably, midway through this podcast, it's something that I need to work on personally. I have a little bit of ignorance when it comes to Mythic Plus because I'm one of those people that I played WoW religiously from vanilla to because I joined Blizzard in 2011, so it must have been around Cataclysm when I stopped playing because I was like full on jumping
and Mythic Plus came afterwards. I think Mythic Plus came around Legion or something, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So a lot of my raiding analogies go back to like 40-man Molten Core or Nax or all of those things that I remember from back then. But I got to admit, I have a bit of ignorance about the current state of things.
It's fine.
But we can reminisce about all those old things at some point. But yeah, so like I was saying, you will basically opt in. You will get gear. Also, before I forget, and this is one of the things that I think's pretty cool, and I feel is probably directed at me because I was a self-professed combat looter during dungeons and raids.
What exactly does that mean, combat looter?
So I know it's bad. But like, Oh, actually, this is, I think, why they implemented a lot of the systems that they did. But I would, while people were still pulling and like worrying about stuff, I'm like, oh, there's a shiny over here. I'm over here worrying about the loot. And obviously, there are systems in that. But one of the things that we're doing in Fellowship, so you will only get loot at the end of the dungeon from a chest. So you can focus on getting through the dungeon. And so, like I said, for people like me, I feel this is directed at combat looters to say, stop doing it, stop worrying about loot until you clear the thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of good.
They kind of do the same thing in Mythic Plus so that people don't stop. You get the loot at the end, which makes sense, especially because you guys are also doing time attack from what I can tell. But one of the things that is mentioned is that there's going to be endlessly scaling difficulty.
Yes.
So how is that going to work? Because I know that it's mentioned in the video. It's like, okay, it's not just more HP. There's going to be more mechanics. Can you give us like a couple of examples?
So I can only kind of speak at this at a very basic level, but my current understanding is that people will access item level gear up until a point, right? They will go through the gear progression. That progression will stop at some point. Also worth noting during that point, and I confirmed this with Axel earlier, and this is all subject to change because we're in alpha, but this is what we're currently thinking, right? When you will have some RNG for loot slots, but when they drop, the stats on that gear will not be RNG.
Okay.
It's locked stats. So if you have that piece of gear drop, that's the best it can drop at for where you're at. So eventually, once you reach the point where you're dropping things at the highest item level, and you have that dropping with the appropriate Ascensions and Curses on, you've got best in slot. That's at least the direction that we want to go in. Because I know that, and this was a conversation we had on our Discord earlier, like, RNG's cool, because you want that moment of like having something drop. I still remember my first Bariza dropping from Nightmare Mephisto in Diablo 2. Like, I remember where I was. Like, that's how like visceral that reaction was. But we don't want then that layer of frustration, like, oh, this roll's good, this roll's bad.
Yeah.
This stat's in this range, this stat's in this range. And effectively, I need to roll 1,000, 1,000,000 of these items to get best on slot, because that's not what we're asking players to do.
I really appreciate the fact that you guys aren't doing that. And by the way, I do resent the fact that you brought up one of the cheesiest items in Diablo 2's existence. Okay.
Okay. We can have a fight about Bariza if you want.
No, listen, I mean, the Amazons that were using Bariza back then, because that became such a flavor of the month thing, and I was like, no, I'm going to find the counter to it, and I did. It was Eaglehorn. Eaglehorn. Yeah. I destroyed Burazons with Eaglehorn. Just to no, that's a bad weapon. Stop.
Yeah, I remember there was a few different metas. There was Bariza, Lysanders for a little bit, maybe. Wind Force, obviously.
Yeah.
And then, I think if you were unhappy with those, then you went Javazon, and that was...
Yeah, but it was funny because Eaglehorn was so much faster, and it had at the time that I picked it up anyways, because I think they changed the way that it works later. But at the time I picked it up, it had that thing where it never misses. So it's like you'd shoot like 1 or 2 guided arrows with Burazon, and I would like pelt you with 10 Eaglehorn shots. And I was like, yeah, this is the way.
Yeah. I feel like we've entered the deep cut nerd cred section of the podcast.
100%.
I'm not mad at it.
But like, so that's going to be I appreciate the fact that there's not going to be random stuff, because it is very frustrating when you get that one gear drop and it's like, oh, this is exactly the piece I've been looking for, except the stats on it suck so bad that it is terrible, or it has the wrong like affixes on it and it just feels bad. So I appreciate the fact that it is not as RNG. And it is more
Yeah.
deterministic. I think that is a good thing. Even
Yeah.
though, in a way, one might argue that diminishes a little bit replayability. What is your plan? I'm guessing this is probably not set in stone because, like you said, you're in early alpha. But if you had to guesstimate, what do you think would take like an average player to get their best in slot, if they can even get there? Because they'd have to become
I
like really
don't
good, I
know.
would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I can only kind of talk about the philosophy. And I was chatting with Axel about this a little bit earlier today. And I was like, am I thinking about this right? Because we do want that player progression. Like, there are character levels which will do things like unlock skills. Because right now, if you've seen some of the videos and stuff we've done at base level, you have access to 8 skills. But there's an action bar with a lot more than that on
Yeah,
it.
I
So
saw the action bar has a lot of slots. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Not an insane amount, but still a lot more than what people will have at level 1. And then people will level up, get access to all of their skills. They will also unlock a lot of talents that will change the way that you want to play your specific hero, for example.
Yeah.
I don't think in the alpha that all of those levels are accessible. I don't know what the max level is in the alpha. I should probably know this. I think it might be 7, but you'll at least have a chance to interact with the skill trees in some way.
Yeah.
And it has a huge impact. It was really cool. So since you're a tank player, from the sounds of things, am I right?
Yes, you are
Okay.
correct.
So Helena, who's she's the sword and board tank. I think one of the first talents you'll have access to is the shield throw that she has, which is very much, donk, donk, donk,
Yeah, paladin shield throw, which
You get that?
bounces.
Yeah, one of the talents you unlock very, very early on is that you can choose to, on block, I think it is, you can basically get a 100% cooldown reduction of your shield throw, which is really fun because it changes the way that you play. So I kind of was playing around with that the other day, and it just feels like even with that one talent, my rotation's just completely thrown out the window.
changes.
It just changes entirely, and also my DPS went up like crazy, which was really
Yeah.
cool.
So I do want to get into builds and stuff, but first I wanted to talk about something else because we're talking about the escalation of difficulty and all that, and this
Yeah.
is a huge thing for me because this is one of the things that frustrates me and I think a lot of people when it comes to Mythic Plus. And this I think is one of the questions that I sent you, which is the design philosophy on kiting versus tanking on higher difficulties. Because one of the things that we definitely saw in Mythic Plus specifically is that at a certain level of difficulty, mobs were just hitting so hard that it was literally impossible to tank them. So tanks that are supposed to sit there and get aggro and, actually tank the damage, they were worthless. And everybody was playing a class that is the Demon Hunter or I think monks could do it as well. And the idea was they just like do a couple of skill shots and whatnot and abilities that grab all the aggro and then they just run around and kite them. And I'm just wondering if that is something that you guys are thinking about for the higher difficulties, or if it's like, no, we want more traditional tanking.
Firstly, I'm a little bit like going back to my trauma as an enhancement shaman. I think it was Razor Gore. Was that
Razor Gore
And
was
Bl-
Black Temple, I think, right?
Blackwing Lair?
No, okay, I'm thinking of something
Anyway,
completely different.
I
Yeah.
remember being an enhancement shaman and earth shocking stuff and running around. Right? And that was the whole thing. But no, I asked Axel this because I wanted to kind of find out his philosophy from a game direction standpoint. And I guess the buzzword for that one is situational, right? We want it to be a good tactic in some situations, and in other situations be a really, really bad idea.
Okay.
So we'll obviously have to see through testing how that pans out, because one of the things that I'm always hyper aware of, having worked in games for a while, because old, is that we can have an intent, but players do things that you can never expect. People will figure out some cheese. They'll figure out something that completely flies against what your intent was. But I can say that the intent is situational. Like, we want it to be like, I feel really smart because I can do this, or if I do it, I'm incredibly, doing the wrong thing. yeah, I guess
Yeah.
testing we'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I'm just concerned because sometimes that means that you get to the higher level difficulties, and if one tank is more mobile and able to deal more range damage than another, then that tank is the one that gets picked because the other one can't survive the mobs. Although in World of Warcraft, there's just so much diversity of classes and whatnot. I don't think you guys will have to worry about that for a while at least, because I'm assuming there'll be more heroes in the future.
Absolutely, but also
Yeah.
this is, I guess, one of the dynamics that you were asking me to kind of pitch before. You were like, what things have been kind of taken from MOBAs, and this is probably the thing that I would say is that in MMOs you have a main for the most part. Like
Yeah.
I'm a warrior main, or like I was saying, I was an enhancement shaman main for a long time, or resto shaman actually. But one of the things that we really want players to do is to be able to have different heroes that they have at max level, and that they can be like, well, this dungeon, the best strat for this is this combination of heroes or that sort of thing, and not feel like they are missing out. So if you're a tank, I would hope at least that you feel comfortable on all of the tanks, if that makes sense. So even if you end up in a situation where, this dungeon that we have slightly tense, because let's be honest, players are going to min-max everything they can.
100%.
Right? Like you say, maybe this tank is slightly better at this one thing, and the design for that dungeon requires 2% more of this. Maybe that hero is the thing that can eke out that 5 seconds across the whole run. Well, we want you to have access to that hero and make sure that you don't feel like you're gimped from choosing that.
So you would be comfortable if there's like a situation where this hero clearly has an advantage over another hero because of the fact that everybody has access to the hero that has the advantage.
Ooh, that's a double-edged sword.
It
But
is.
I get. I see what you're getting at. I think.
Yeah, because like usually I like still maining a character even when you have like multiple heroes. So like I look at your whole roster, and the character that speaks to me the most, as you said, her name is Helena. I wasn't aware because she's called the War Master, I think, in the video.
Yeah, so
You guys
there's been
call her
2
the War
trailers.
Master. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I look at the War Master like that looks exactly like what I want. Big heavy armor, sword and shield. I'm good to go. That's the one, right? And I will probably try to do everything I can on that character. Every now and then swapping around, but to basically master that one character. That's usually the way that I operate, but it seems like you guys are more like, well, there's going to be some situations where this one's going to be the best one.
So let me just kind of go back a little bit.
Yeah,
because
go ahead.
I totally understand what you were getting at. But the design intent, I would say, is that there's not that it's all flat, right? Like all of the tanks should be able to do things. But then my asterisk on that is, let's be honest,
Yeah.
players will find a way to eke out that little tiny extra bit, whether it's not even an interaction with just that tank, right? So let's say the rest of your group composition is the same. But, we also have to take into account how do different tanks interact with different healers, for example. So it's going to be like, I don't envy people on the design team for a lot of these games a lot of the time because the balance of it, and like I said at the start of this podcast, Axel was deep in balancing, spoilers, I'll give you a bit of insight. He was looking at Rhyme and Adios.
The two casters.
Basically the 2 ranged DPS casters, one of who was dot based and one of who was not. And they obviously have very different styles. And in this one situation that Axel was looking at, which I think was end game gear and across 3 static targets over time, Adios was doing double the damage of Rhyme. But then it's all situational, right? So it's this balance that obviously we're going to get a whole bunch of data during the alpha, and there'll be all sorts of numbers to crunch. And that's just life with these online games, right? There's always going to be something to balance. but yeah, it's going to be exciting. But while you were talking, there was one other thing that I wanted to mention, and we haven't done yet hero previews of the tanks. For example, like I was trying to articulate this before, even Helena has a big difference from Mako. For example, Helena has no self-healing, whereas Mako does.
Boo!
So,
the shield character should have self-healing.
well, she has some like reactive toughness stuff, but like this is what I mean. There's stuff that you're going to have to kind of take into account.
Yeah.
And then there's the way in which the healers that you play with will play. Vigor has one heal over time, not super a big deal, but Sylvie has heaps of heals over time. So maybe we will see, again, I'm not going to speak to the designer's intent here. I'm now speaking as like a gamer and like theory crafting. Maybe we'll see that Sylvie works really well with this tank, but Vigor works really well with this other tank. I don't know. This is where it's going to be really interesting to see how players
how the community
theory
is
craft
run
our stuff.
with it. Yeah.
And already, and this is, I kind of laugh because I made the distinct decision in the hero previews, because I've recorded them all in 9:16, which cuts out the tooltips. So people aren't getting the values for all the stuff, but people on the Discord are already looking at the combat text that's, that's popping up, and they've already made spreadsheets within a day. They're like reverse engineering all the systems, and it makes me so happy to see. But yeah, players going to be players. They're gonna figure out something.
So
but yeah.
One of the things that I was very curious the moment I saw it is because usually we tend to see some, like we're just talking about players min-maxing everything, and one of the things that they'll do sometimes, they'll go straight to unconventional team compositions. Is that something that you are planning on supporting, or is that something that's like, no, every team needs to have one healer, one tank, and 3 DPSers? Like, can I just go in with, let's say, oh, I found this really cheesy strat, we're going in with 5 healers.
5 would be really cheesy because our game has it 4 maximum.
I could swear I saw in the video that it said 5.
No, it's 4.
Oh no, wait! I didn't see it. I counted the models. Maybe there was an enemy in there that I thought was a character. Yeah, that was my bad.
Or maybe you've just completely spoiled one of the hacks that we have to be able to capture footage, because I don't know if that snuck into the trailer.
Because I was looking at the trailer, and I remember at one point, I think even in my video, I paused and I was like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 players here. So it's like, that's the way that I thought about it.
If you saw that, no one has flagged that yet, and I really hope it's not true, because in theory, one of the like hack.
Unless I like counted an enemy by mistake, but I think that's what
honestly,
it was.
If you can find that and send me the time code, you were the first person that has pointed this out.
Because, do I get a prize?
Anyway, yes. No. So obviously filming trailers and stuff at an alpha stage, you don't have all the tools. One of the tools we have is add a secret 5th player and use their free camera to be able to capture stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. If anyone finds it,
it's 4 players, so it's like,
okay.
Are you guys gonna, let's say we find something really cheesy and I go in with 4 healers? Is that something that you guys are okay with, or would you rather like, no, y'all have to? This is strict format: 1 healer, 1 tank, 2 DPS.
I can't speak to the absolute overall intent, but I can tell you what I've heard Axel say to other people. The goal is that at the absolute top level, like let's say we're like really trying to push like for competitive times, that it should be balanced around 1 healer, 1 tank, and 2 DPS. Are people going to figure out ways to do some pretty janky stuff? Probably. We've done dungeons with 4 healers. Like, that's possible. Is it competitive? No. But again, I am never surprised by what people are able to do.
Because like
4 tanks, maybe.
To give you an idea, recently with the launch of their latest expansion, Final Fantasy XIV, they actually had a healer strike because one of the streamers that was at their media tour, he just decided like, hey, let's just do a dungeon without healers, and it was just him and 3 DPSers, and the healers got really mad. Like, you can't do this, even though that's like a super niche thing, and you're never going to do that in a competitive environment. It was just like people got upset over it, and I was just
no. I mean, to be clear, it's possible. We want people to have fun, and people will figure out all sorts of cool stuff, like I mentioned. But is it going to be competitive? I would be shocked if it is.
No, I can already see like 4 range DPSers just like going at it, kiting everything, murdering everything. I don't know. I'm just joking.
Yeah, no. But like, I know that if or probably when these things come out of the woodwork, when I turn up to work that day and I say to the design team, "Hey, did you see this? What happens?" They'll be like, "No, please no!" Like,
why would they do this?
Yeah, but yeah. Nothing would surprise me.
Yeah. So a bit of like an off-topic thing almost, but just for curiosity's sake, how are you guys handling story? Because this is not really the type of game that people go into for story or big narrative. I would imagine you guys are going to go more for the lore approach of having like lore tidbits here and there, reasoning for what people are doing, what they're doing, or are you planning on an actual like narrative that's going to be told through these dungeons?
I would kind of best describe. You're going to like this one.
Okay.
I would best describe the parallels made. And Breton, our design director, used this in one of the interviews we did.
I know what's coming.
It's a little bit like Dark Souls, maybe.
There you go.
You know? But like that. I actually now spy that. I think the Dark Souls 2 Collector's Edition statue.
The Farum Knight, and and over here is actually I don't know, you can't see this one because the camera that you're looking at you can't. But the what's his name, Mesmer, is in there as well.
Oh, cool!
People can see this in the actual video though.
I have the same collector's edition, the Dark Souls 2 one, and that little pommel fell off the bottom. I glued it back together. Frustrating me so much. I lost it, and I need to 3D print it at some point. But that just reminded me. So thanks. No. Yeah. But so I think that's a good parallel. We I think, to simplify, Fellowship is absolutely minute-to-minute gameplay first.
Yeah.
Like tight gameplay, get people in, play. For the people who are interested, though, we want the world to make sense. Right? We have this experience where people will be going off to disparate dungeons that look and feel very different, but we don't want it to feel like completely disjointed, like there needs to be some overarching world building that makes sense. So there will be, things that pick up here and there, like whether that's on various, visual storytelling or descriptions of things. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to get put in there, but I would say non-linear storytelling is what could be expected.
It's always going to be gameplay first. Players are never going to be expected like, okay, I have to watch this cutscene before you can play. That's never going to be a thing for Fellowship, I would imagine.
We don't have any cutscenes.
There's no cutscenes even yet. Okay.
There's a loading screen.
With tips.
But no, I haven't heard anyone talk about cutscenes. No.
So considering the thing that you just mentioned about like bringing in new players and all of this stuff, let's say that I'm a player, let's say Fellowship's been out for a while. I'm a regular player. I'm about 50 hours into progression, right? I've been grinding. I don't know what level of progression I'd be 50 hours in, but I would imagine I'd be pretty far away from a player that just starts today. And today I just convinced my good friend to join in and start playing Fellowship as well. How does this work when we have this disparate? I don't know what the word is. Disparate.
Yeah.
Because I'm Portuguese. I'm actually not a native English speaker, but I
got you.
So like disparate experience where I'm much further ahead in progression than they are. Can we play together? How will I be meaningfully rewarded for playing with my low-level friend?
I know exactly what you're talking about. So gear normalization is something I do not know what the plan is for that. But that's a really interesting question that I do not have an answer for. Because obviously we want people to group up with their friends. I need to put that on my list of things to find out. Because like you're right. If I have crazy eye level gear stuff and you're coming in with nothing, how do we still have a fun experience together?
Yeah,
Good
because
question.
I would expect that it wouldn't just be me. Oh, I'll just carry you through this progression super fast, boost you into it, and now you're at endgame as well. And in the meantime, you've learned nothing, so you don't even know how to play or the basic mechanics or anything like that.
Yeah,
And
that's not fun.
and if I can leave a suggestion, like one of the important things for this is usually because like even if you scale down the gear, right, and I don't even have to do anything, my gear just gets scaled down to be on his tier of difficulty that he's playing at. Number one, I think that's a good thing. Even if there's no additional rewards, I think that's a good thing because at least I won't just be going in there and trampling the dungeon because most people don't have fun when that happens, right? It's like nobody wants to just sit there and watch their friends destroy everything while they're just sitting back. Oh, wow, that's really fun. So I think that gear scaling is one of the ways. And the other thing is there needs to be some kind of like, I don't know, a currency or something that you award the veteran player for helping out these lower level players, and they get some kind of a reward basically for doing it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's definitely the option for that. Like, so for example, even now, when you're finishing dungeons, there's a chest that has loot in it. Some of that loot is crafting materials. So those materials are used to like level up your gear and stuff. So I could see that as a way to still incentivize someone who's, let's say, carrying, a lower level player through stuff, and doesn't need the items, but still has something to walk away with.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that would be a good thing. But you just brought up crafting, and this is actually another one of the questions that I had. Is there any crafting in Fellowship?
So right now there's a very rudimentary system, I would say, for the alpha. So I don't have all the answers about what the launch version of this looks like, but just so people go into the alpha knowing what to expect. We talked before about how you will have gear that drops at a specific item level. You'll, when you finish dungeons, get also some other materials, like crafting materials, that you can spend in the stronghold to upgrade that gear to like the next item level.
Okay.
So
it's
very,
mostly just like item level upgrades right now. Because my thoughts on Warframe is I was thinking, are you going to have something like, let's say, oh, I'm actually going to farm this dungeon to get this drop that allows me to craft this weapon or this armor or something like that. That's not something that you have in the works. You just get the loot at the end of the dungeon and that's it, right?
So in the alpha, that the system I just explained is what we have. I love the systems you just outlined. And again, I can't promise anything because now I'm speaking as just a player and I don't want to get in trouble with my designers. So I don't know what the launch plans are or how robust that crafting system will be. Personally, I can say that I love that moment when you go into a dungeon and you're like, I need this drop. I need this thing to drop and then I can craft this thing. But it needs to be balanced with that other conversation we were having earlier, where we don't want players to have to rely on like a 0.1% drop to get their best in slot. Do you know what I mean? So if it's, and this, I guess, goes to that, I guess it's a tabletop RPG thing that I always latch onto is like, if it's fun, like rule of fun, we should allow players to have access to it. But if it's making the game not fun, then don't do it. Yeah, that's oversimplifying, but you know.
So we have, considering that we have heroes instead of actually creating our own characters. This is one of the things that I saw a lot of people talk about, both in my video and I think even in your comment section, where people were saying like they wanted to create their own character because they like getting attached to the one character. Naturally, that's not your design philosophy. But like with you having all of these heroes, how is the loot going to work?
Oof.
Because I would imagine that if I'm playing Helena, I wouldn't get a piece of gear for Mako unless they can share the gear. Like, I don't know.
I'm 90% sure you are correct. So at least in the alpha, I can say that's 100% true. You will only get
Loot for your
wearable
hero.
items for your hero. You will get account-wide crafting materials.
Okay. So each hero does have their individual loot drops. So if I'm playing Helena, I can't get loot for Mako.
Yes. In the alpha, that is true.
Okay.
And I would assume that that's the intent going forward. But again, we are not at launch, so I just want to keep putting the little asterisks in. Obviously subject to change if there's
everything said in this podcast is subject to change because of the progression status that you guys are at with the game, which makes sense. Yeah,
I think you make a good point though, and I think that speaks to a lot of player frustrations, right? Like if I am in a game where I only intend to ever play a tank, right?
Yeah.
And I start getting an inventory that's full of healer gear, I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah, exactly.
What do I do with all this stuff? So we definitely don't want that.
Yeah, okay, that's good. So you were talking earlier about talents, and I'm curious, like, okay, so how are we working in terms of talents? I think in the video you guys also talked about set bonuses, relics, which I don't even know what a relic is. So tell me more about these things.
Ooh, I'll do my best. So like I said, the talents they'll unlock as you go through the level progression, and they'll give you access to different ways that you can basically tailor your hero. You'll go through different levels and you'll have points to spend, and you can spend them in any which way you want. So I obviously off the top of my head I can't remember all the talents we have in the game.
Yeah, of course.
But I'll just speak to the general philosophy. As you get down, you'll have things that cost more talent points and some things that cost less. So if I want to have a bunch of different effects that are low cost investment, I can do that. Or maybe I want to pick a bunch of high cost ones. I'll have to be very selective about which ones I choose.
So there's like a tier system where you can go deep into the tree or you can go lower into the tree and then you can get more things, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the basic idea of how it works.
Okay. And how easy is it to respec? Can we just respec whenever we want, or is there a cost associated with it?
That I don't know. In the alpha, I remember it being very easy. And I think as long as you're outside of a dungeon, you can do it.
Okay.
Again, don't quote me on that, but yeah, I don't see us going the route of like mid-dungeon talent changes.
No. That's not what I was bringing up. It's more like, I put I put a thing into this talent, and now it's like this big commitment, and now I'm screwed, and I've ruined this character, and what do I do now, right? That's kind of like the point that I'm trying to make. I always think it's better, especially in a game like this, that it's like, are you not in combat? Not even not in combat. Are you not in a dungeon? Because your whole game is in dungeons, basically. But it's like, are you not inside a dungeon right now? Then you can respec. Yeah. That's kind of the way that I would look at it.
We talked about Diablo 2 earlier. I don't know if you remember, like, you had to roll a new character.
Yeah, that's it. It's like, you put one stat point wrong? Well, that's too bad, buddy.
Yeah,
that's gone. That character's ruined forever.
Exactly. Oh, I remember it well. It was a time.
I had so many characters. And the best part was like when you were doing something and it's like the stat is good, but Blizzard patched something, and now this stat is worthless, and now this character's done. It's like,
You're like, that's a year of my life. Like, it's gone.
Yeah. But what about set bonuses? So you guys are going to feature set bonuses. Do you know like any of those effects, something that you could give an example of?
I'm thinking of so set bonuses in the alpha only start to trickle in as you get up the difficulties. So I don't have a lot of memory about our recent play sessions with the set bonuses. But for example, one of them, and I think I was playing one of the casters, but there was like a haste set bonus, for example, that came in, and it made a huge impact. And I know this is something that Axel has talked about, that he really wants for it to be very noticeable when these things...
When a set bonus activates, it's not just like a little passive thing that you barely notice? Okay.
Yeah. It'll be a passive thing, but it will feel
it'll
very
change.
Different.
Yeah.
Right? Like you'll notice a big change in the way that it feels, that your hero feels. In terms of a completely wide set of set bonuses, we'll have to kind of see once the alpha's out exactly what the exhaustive list of those are. But they are in the alpha, so people will have a chance to play around with those for sure.
Yeah, and is your vision that by the time you get your best in slot, there's a definitive playstyle, especially with like set bonuses in place? And you gave the example of, I have this talent that makes my shield bounce around, and that makes this this playstyle very, very strong. Do you think that when we get best in slot, it's like, okay, you're best in slot, you get one playstyle for this one hero and that's it? Or do you think that your philosophy is going to be more around, we want, say, Helena to be able to play, okay, you have this special attack with your sword, and there's a endgame build that works with that. You have the shield bounce thing. There's an endgame build that works with that. There's another one that works with like a special jump attack she does or something like that.
Yeah.
And you have like all of these different endgame builds, all of them viable, excelling in different things. Or do you see it more like, no, the shield bounce attack is her endgame thing, and it's the BiS, and that's it?
No, absolutely. We want players to have options, right?
With the same hero, though. That's
yeah, definitely. So even in the talents, when you start to be able to sink your teeth into them, there's definitely options tailored towards different skills or different ways of playing. So again, it's something that we're really excited to see how players do it, because we have obviously the way that we're intending.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know that we're going to see some things that will be, maybe people will do it exactly the way we expect. Maybe they won't. But yeah, multiple styles for one hero, absolutely.
Okay. So with the gear progression, are we actually going to see cosmetic changes in the characters when they equip a new piece of gear?
Oh yeah, that's one of my things I'm really excited to communicate, because in the trailer everything is captured with base gear.
Yeah.
So we haven't even had a chance to show off just how much gear there is. I was actually I sit just outside the door is Marcus, one of our character artists, and he's got this scene in Unreal which lines up all of the characters, all of their gear, all the quality level differences, and there's like, I don't want to say, but it's like, to me it looked like hundreds of different character models and T-pose with all of the different
whatever you do,
visual
don't show
differences.
that. Don't show that to people, because people should be surprised when they start collecting that gear. There's been a tendency that I've noticed with some publishers where they reveal too much of video games ahead of time. Like recently, Shadow of the Earth Tree, the Elden Ring DLC. I purposely did not watch the last two trailers that they've done. And I will say that I had a significantly better experience because of it, because I went back after I finished the DLC and I was like, wait, they showed literally every single boss with the exception of the final one. I was like, what? You just revealed everything. They show every zone, every boss. There's like no surprises left to be had. That's why I'm saying,
I know exactly what you mean.
Don't
and
reveal
I have the
everything. Let people like, oh my God, this gear set looks really cool.
Yeah.
The joy of discovery. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. It's that same thing with movie trailers these days.
Yeah.
I find myself stopping a movie trailer 20 seconds in. I'm like, I know I want to watch this. I really don't want to watch the rest of this trailer, because it's everything. It's the whole movie.
Yeah.
Anyway. But yeah, that's a good point. Maybe I won't show everyone the vanity stuff or the
show something,
the visual impact of the art
but
sets.
Definitely don't show everything. Don't show some of the more exotic thing. Now people are going to get mad at me. It's like, Rurikhan's telling them not to show us things.
I want to see everything. Boycott Rurikhan, please.
That's fine. But so gear changes as you equip actual gear. Do you have like a cosmetic thing, like transmog type system that people can use as well?
There will be a transmog system.
Yeah,
yes.
that's what I would expect, because people are, even though there's the gear progression thing, people will want to like tailor thing. And while we're on the topic of transmog, can you change anything about the way the heroes look?
At the base level, no. No, it's all going to be like the gear that you equip changes the way that your character looks. Yeah.
I would
That's how it is right now.
I would recommend like haircuts.
I mean, I love a good haircut.
Being able to change like a character's haircut, or like a couple of, just a little bit touch-ups, because that makes people relate to the character more, because like it's not just Helena anymore, it's my Helena. It's like, it gets players more invested, I feel like. At least that's something that I like.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. I do not disagree with you. No, it's going to be really exciting. Like, this is one of the things that we've been really excited to see from the initial reception. Obviously, we are not blind to the the assumption, and it's also, I mean, I'll freely admit, it was the assumption I had when I first looked at the project the very first time I saw it. I was like, oh, heroes, not character customization. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't kind of wrap my head around that the first time I saw it. I get it now. I see what it affords us from the development side. I see the opportunities that we have with that system. It's different, right? But I totally understand why people have that first reaction to having a character customization thing. But who knows what will, like, just how far we'll be able to push that, let's say, freedom of expression that people will have with their characters. We love that idea of people being able to make their character look the way that they want it, but it will be within the system of the hero.
Yeah, it's still a hero.
Right?
You're not making
Yeah.
a character because it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense because this is just the basis of your game to begin with. So yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, it took me a while to see that that's what I love about MOBAs, but it takes some time to reconcile.
Yeah.
Right? You need to kind of sit with the game, understand it, and realize how is our game different, and it might be different from what my expectation is from the first time I see it.
I would have actually expected that you were going to talk about like skins for these characters or something, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly where things are going to pan out with that. We definitely want to give, I'll say that we want to give people options to make the heroes look the way that they want to. We know that there's a transmog system. I can definitely say that.
yeah.
How do we give people more transmog options? We need to figure that out.
Yeah, I would assume that everything should be earnable in game, considering that it is going to be a premium game. But you know, obviously, business model and all that. Yeah, we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah.
One of the big things as you are progressing through gear and just progressing through the difficulty of the dungeons is going to be, what is your design philosophy around gear versus skill? Like, what's the balance that you kind of feel like you're shooting for? And when I say skill, I don't mean like character skills. I mean player skill.
Yeah. No, I totally get what you mean. I think I started trying to talk about this a little bit earlier because I had the same conversation earlier today. We want people to experience what I think we all kind of love about these games is that power fantasy, right?
Yeah.
Where you get a new weapon or a new piece of armor and you're like, oh, I feel how different that allows me to play, or I'm doing that much damage, I am taking that much less damage. So gear needs to be important, mixed in with the fact that we want less RNG on gear. But essentially, players will pick up gear, and as they go through their experience, people will find their power spike, and they will be, you might get lucky and find all of the gear that you want your first few runs. You'll probably separate yourself from, let's say, the pack quite quickly through a bit of luck, but very quickly, because we don't have that layers on layers and layers of RNG, everyone will kind of get to the point where they, at the end, and I don't know how long this will take.
Yeah.
We need to kind of figure that out. But I would imagine that there will be people who play X amount of hours. I don't know how many, but a reasonable amount of hours for people who play a lot. They'll all end up with the similar, if not the same gear. Because when we get to that point, that's when people are going to get very competitive, and that's when skill makes the difference rather than gear. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the point is, you guys are not going to gatekeep gear too far away from people. It appears to be what you're going for. So
No, but we want it to be fun still.
Yeah.
Where people like pick up gear and they're like, okay, cool. Now I have a lot of power. That's great.
yeah. So, but basically, the point is that player skill, when you get to the end of it, is going to be way more important than getting that final piece of BiS.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
And that last piece of BiS will be attainable,
Yeah.
you know?
And so, what would be the? Because this is one of the things that people really concern themselves with, which is it's a weird thing to me. Because one of the things that I always complained about is that when it comes to the way that they dole out gear in Mythic Plus, it was very frustrating for me because they make it almost like a mobile game. So like the idea is you would have to do 10 Mythic Plus runs a week or something like that. I don't remember exactly how many it was. But it would vary. And basically, okay, so if you do, let's say, 3 Mythic Plus runs, we unlock the first thing in the vault. And if you do 6, we unlock the third thing. And then if you unlock 4, but basically they unlock a bunch of slots in a vault. And then at the end of every week, like on the reset day, which was Tuesdays or Wednesdays, I forget, then you would go to the vault and all of the spots that you've unlocked in the vault, they become completely random pieces of loot. Like one, like, 3 items out of a list of 200 or 500. I don't even know. And you get 3 random items and they're just like role appropriate. So you get to choose the role, right? So if you're a tank, these will be 3 tanking items, but they're completely random. And basically you spent all week farming these mythic dungeons or whatever, and then at the end here's this thing. And I would always complain. I'd be like, this is stupid, because you get almost no loot in the dungeon itself, and then you have to wait, like this is a mobile game, to get the loot at the end of the week in this vault that doesn't even make any sense, but whatever. And then you get to choose one of those items to keep.
Okay, yeah, we don't have anything like that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, this would mean that it takes players a long time to gear up. And whenever I would bring up this topic, people will tell me, well, of course, what are you going to do after you gear up? You don't play anymore. Because there's this notion that players will stop playing once they get their BiS. Now, to me, I've always looked at it like, well, what do you mean? If I was able to get my BiS, then I would definitely be pushing higher and higher dungeons. And my question is, if you eventually get your BiS, what's going to be like the motivation for people to keep pushing for more? Like, what is your design philosophy there?
I mean, it's clearly leaderboards. Like that's for those people that absolutely get best in slot everything. It'll be the carrot on the stick will be leaderboards, and we really want to make that something that's celebrated, and that people who are able to be top of the leaderboards, that they feel like a bit of a badass, like that they can, they can feel like they've achieved something really cool, that they, whether that's, I don't know, now I'm speculating as a fan, whether that's like something like vanity or titles or, a specific skin for a mount. I don't know, but I would like to think that we get to the point where...
you open a really big can of worms. You said mount.
Yeah, there are mounts. There
are?
Yeah. So this is in the trailer. It's not a secret. But you only see it over the shoulder of one of our artists, and he's it's filmed from my camera onto his screen. But there are mounts in the game. Yeah.
How will you use mounts inside a dungeon?
I mean, there are maybe some, if you're running back to the group, they're not going to be a big part of gameplay. But they're just kind of they're just a fun thing to have in there. If you...
It's almost like Heroes of the Storm in a way.
Possibly.
Yeah. Because you would just mount up to kind of like catch up to go to a lane or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good parallel. Yeah. So there's not like our game doesn't have an open world. So you're not traversing like huge open spaces with them. But, if you need to get back to your group, there are mounts.
So one of the things that was pointed out during the video as well is that there's going to be 2 game modes, adventure dungeons and ranked dungeons. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, I don't know if the trailer does the best job of explaining that.
Yes, because it was really weird when the trailer said adventure dungeons are 10 minutes and ranked dungeons are 30 minutes. And I was like, it almost seemed like it should be the other way around. I don't know. This is kind of weird.
This is the fun of talking about a game that's in alpha.
Yeah.
Things are definitely shifting around. So I think maybe the better way we should have worded it, because and also things are changing around.
Yeah.
Is that we have 2 types of dungeons. One is called an adventure, which lasts about 10 to 15 minutes, and one we should just call a dungeon. All right?
Okay.
2 types of dungeons. A small one and a big one. Okay? With me so far? Then you you will be able to play both of those variants in ranked or unranked. That's a better explanation of it.
Oh, because that's not what the trailer says at all.
No. Because this is like, designs have been shifting so quickly where we are at this point. And again, they might change again.
Yeah, that's
But-
that's that agility that we were talking about at the beginning of the
Yeah.
podcast. It's like we can
Yeah.
just change stuff around. There's like no big
Exactly.
boss to kind of like stop us from like, hey, now the dungeons are longer. Hey, it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but let's kind of just talk speculatively.
About adventure dungeons versus regular dungeons.
So
yeah.
as a player, I want to do a short dungeon. Well, I want to have a short experience. Let's call it an adventure.
yeah.
And it has one boss, and I just want to get some loot and get out. I only have 10 minutes before I need to head to work.
Quick match.
Whatever. Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
I maybe have a bit more time. I have half an hour. I could queue up for a dungeon. It has 3 bosses, maybe 4. I think most of our dungeons have 3. Anyway, not the point. But I have half an hour. I can play a full dungeon, or a combination of both. Then maybe I want to play those in ranked. I can do that experience in either of those. So
Okay.
I think that's the current intent. Now, if you ask me what the difference between ranked and unranked is, we need to kind of brush
ranked
up on that.
ranked I would imagine is strictly for the leaderboards, and not ranked is more like a casual thing where people aren't
Yeah, like
going to be giga tryharding.
Yeah, we have quick play. So, maybe in quick play there's certain variables or anything. But
Yeah.
as it stands for players, they have different lengths to choose from. That makes
Okay.
sense. Yeah.
So those are 2 different types of dungeons, and how there's going to be matchmaking for these dungeons, obviously, right? And
Yes.
I'm assuming you're also going to be able to bring in your pre-made party, whether that's 1 player, 2 players, 3 players, 4 players, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Um,
it just matchmakes with whoever else is on the pool if you're doing matchmaking.
Yeah, I need to talk to like our matchmaking people here who would tell me the logic behind how that matchmaking works. I assume it probably looks at item level. I don't think we have any kind of right now any MMR system built.
Yeah.
I don't know what the future holds for how we would want to matchmake that stuff in the absolute end game, but maybe. And again, I'm speculating. Maybe, and I'm getting a little bit carried away. Maybe we want to look at things like player efficiency, or your fastest clear as a tank, or something like that. I don't know. Maybe there's some skill-based things we want to put in the matchmaking. I'm not sure, but I think for the matchmaking in the alpha, I'm pretty sure it's a basic item level lookup.
Yeah.
that it
And
would be looking at.
in terms of ranked, that is also going to have matchmaking for ranked, or would that have to be a pre-made?
I assume there would be some matchmaking, but most people will probably do.
Yeah, most people want to do ranked pre-mades if they can find 3 other friends to play with them, but I'm assuming
Yeah.
there will still be a sizable chunk of people that will want to do pug ranked.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's
I
something
assume
that
so
you
too.
plan on supporting, right?
Oh, definitely supporting. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that I definitely saw on screen, which is it's a little bit strange to see this on screen of a brand new game, because a lot
Okay.
of people shy away from this. You guys straight up put damage meters on screen. I saw this.
Yeah. That was one of the first things that we implemented in this build.
One of the
Oh,
first
not
things
in
you
this build.
implemented was the damage meter.
Okay. Whoa. Hang on.
I know some people
Okay.
that are not going to like that.
No. Okay, hang on. Let me clarify. The damage meters have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's one of the things that, and it's not just damage; it's healing and damage
Yeah.
taken and all that sort of stuff.
I think I also saw boss cooldowns pop up in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's cover the damage meter stuff first.
Yeah.
So the obviously we use it internally to find out, for balancing. We want to find out if something's broken or that sort of thing. Like we've had builds that we've had internally where healers are out DPSing like crazy, or random edge cases. So as a testing tool internally, it's really good for us. And obviously players use it all the time as well.
Yeah.
So it's in there. It's in the alpha. It's just part of where the game is at right now, and yeah, we know that people use them, so we have it in there as well.
You're just going to support it baseline. So what are your your thoughts about people making their own add-ons? Is that something that you plan on supporting? Kind of like how World of Warcraft has like the Lua interface that just lets people code in whatever they want. Because there's other stuff that I want to bring up specifically into this topic, but I want to know what your general position is.
The general
people
position
making their own add-ons.
Yeah, I can be completely specific. The answer is no. We do not want players to be making their own UI add-ons, but we want to support the things that make sense for the way that people play. We want to have like a level playing field, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, I'll speak from personal experience, it can feel like it gets to the point where games are almost playing themselves.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Very much so.
And I think we want to stray away from that. Like, I would personally prefer that our game feels less like a data entry job and more like I'm looking at what's happening. And okay, maybe this is like speaking to my Dark Souls like excitement. I want to be able to look at a boss and be like, they're telegraphing this attack right now.
Actually read
Do you know
the
what
boss. I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously the way in which we telegraph that in the game, you'll very quickly see, is a lot more straightforward than what a Dark Souls game does.
Yeah.
We have, stay out of the fire, very clear markings, and that sort of things. And there's going to be certain UI things that pop up, but you
guys are going to develop, not like something that you're going to let other players bring in and stuff. So
Exactly.
that's very good to hear, because that's another one of my complaints that I have when it comes to again, World of Warcraft, Mythic Dungeons, and all this stuff, is that basically Blizzard has kind of been in an arms race against add-ons, wherein, people have evolved add-ons to the point where the game pretty much does just play itself. Where like, I jumped from World of Warcraft at one point, now went to play Final Fantasy XIV, and I was trying to learn how to raid in Final Fantasy XIV, and I was streaming it, and people in my chat were saying, no, you have to look at the boss. When the boss raises his right arm, and I was like, look at the boss? I never had to do that in World of Warcraft. There's just a big graphic that tells me when the attack is coming. Because that's kind of like what I was used to when it came to MMOs, because Blizzard just accepted the fact that like, oh, deadly boss mods exists, and therefore they would just try to come up with mechanics to circumvent deadly boss mods to a point where pretty much right now, the top rating teams in that game, they have people in their roster not designed, but specialized in designing add-ons. So like they will take these people with them to like, whenever it comes to competitions and stuff, they'll design add-ons on site and they'll put and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, what game are we playing? This is crazy. There's all of these weak aura things that people put in there. It's absolutely crazy, which is why I brought up the UI questions.
Yeah. No, I think we come from a very similar like perspective, you and I, like, and this is I'm going to tie together our two loves here. I think it can go too far when the games explain everything to you. So, for example, we don't want UI popping up every time something happens, giving you a countdown to use every ability at the right point and purge this thing by, something that you can hotkey by doing this. Like, sure. But on the other side, I love in a game like Sekiro that made me feel smart. Do you know what I mean? And you have those moments where the little glint off the like sword, and you know what's coming. You know it's a thrust or something like that. And you
do
get
the
that
Mikiri
moment.
counter.
Exactly. And you know that you have to press down and this thing at that time, and you feel intelligent and it's successful, and you feel like you've done something great. I don't think we can go that far, because we also have a group setting where you have a free camera. Imagine I'm a healer, right? And I'm facing the other way doing something else, and I wasn't looking at the boss in that split second because I'm focusing on something else. We don't want like that to wipe the team either. But yeah, I would like to see
specifically
kind of a nice balance between those things. Sorry.
Specifically, like with cast bars is an important thing, because in some situations, like you will be, especially as a healer, you're targeting a player, you're not targeting the boss, so you can't see his cast bar, and the boss is like starts loading up his big nuke, and you're like, oh, but I'm focusing on healing these people over here. And then you target the boss, and the big nuke is like 0.5 seconds away from exploding. You're like, oh, I didn't do my big cooldown yet. So stuff like that should be shown on screen for everyone, I feel like, in a way that makes sense. But yeah.
Like I was playing the other day when we were doing the preview events, and I was playing Vigor, one of the healers. And
is that the dwarf healer, by the way?
Yeah, it is.
Such a weird name for a dwarf, I have to say. As a big dwarf fan, I'm like, Vigo is not what I would imagine for a dwarven name.
So also, you pick up on something interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot. It's also like, it's spelt, and with my New Zealand accent, it would be vigor.
Yeah, vigor.
Like Vigour. But because we're in Sweden, the pronunciation is Vigor.
Vigor.
But yeah. So I think there's a little bit of like a regional thing happening there. Anyway, but I'll stick with the Swedish because that's now canon. But anyway, I was playing the other day and I found myself looking at cast bars a lot, cast bars and the healing frames that we have in right now, and I got absolutely punished because I wasn't looking at my positioning, and I liked it. I was like, that's cool. It didn't like, I didn't have anything flashing up on screen that was like, warning, this thing is this close to you, 1 meter, 2 meter, you know, it's, I want to have to be told. I don't want to have to be on your toes.
Yeah, you have to. I want
to like have the challenge.
Especially like as a healer, you got like 3 health bars that you got to look at. Well, 4 if you count your own, but it's not like a raid frame that's like 20 bars and you have to look at all those, play whack-a-mole and whatnot. So it should be easier to pay attention to your positioning. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. But we also want people to have that familiarity. If they've been looking at healing frames and they like doing that, they should be able to do that. But they need to also pay attention to some other stuff.
While we're on the topic of targeting, one of the things that I meant to ask earlier, and I kind of forgot because I started jumping around my notes, is this game tab targeting or action combat or a mix?
Tab targeting right now.
Okay, tab targeting. Yeah. And I'm assuming that means... would blocking / parrying be active still, even because you can do that with tab targeting as well, but
so say again, blocking and parrying.
If it's like active, so like for instance, if I'm playing Helena, do I need to put up my shield, or there's a percentage chance to block?
There's a percentage chance to block, but you do have some.
The toughness mechanic that you talked about, which is so there's an active component to it as well. Yeah,
we actually have a skill called Shields Up, which is nice.
That's good.
So I knew you'd like that one. So I'm actually really interested to hear your take on Helena after the alpha. I think we should. I'm going to bug you to chat again so we can.
That's fine.
See what you think.
So with one of the things that was brought up when you're talking more about, I'm assuming that the ranked dungeons all have this, even if not the ranked dungeons. We talked about how there's small dungeons and big dungeons. I'm assuming that kill score is only a thing for the big dungeons. The small dungeons probably don't have kill score, I would imagine.
No, they do.
They do?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So to be able to access the loot at the end of any dungeon, you need to have completed the kill score and killed all the bosses. So in the smaller adventures, that's 1 boss. In the bigger ones, it's 3 or 4 bosses. But you will always need to complete the kill score.
So tell me more about the design philosophy of Kill Score, because I feel like people that don't do Mythic Plus, I think Mythic Plus is the only thing that does... They don't call it Kill Score. I don't even know what they actually call it on there. I just call it percentage, because you can need to kill a certain percentage of the dungeon in order to actually progress. It's actually one of the more frustrating things for me in Mythic Plus, and I definitely want to dive deep into this, but like, what is your design philosophy behind the Kill Score? I
mean, I haven't played any other games that have kill score because like I mentioned, I think Frozen Throne was like the last last one I did.
Legion is where it started,
Yeah. But I did ask Axel about this, so I'm just going to look at my notes.
Go
ahead. Because this is you did tell me you were going to ask about this.
So I'll just tell you the reason I asked that question is because the way that you have to do things, especially when you're the tank. Because to me, the biggest thing about the kill score feature that you guys put in there is that it's just additional work for the tank. That's it. It's all on the tank's shoulders because the healer's not the one who has to pull enemies. The DPSers are not usually the ones who have to pull enemies. In some edge cases, they might be. But basically, the tank now has to essentially memorize a route that they have to take through the dungeon, which is going to be the most optimal route where they're going, okay, we're going to skip this pack because this pack is annoying, and instead we're going to compensate by killing this other pack ahead. And there's always going to be like a better way of doing things. But I just don't find that to be a super interesting thing because it's just memorizing, and I'm terrible about memorizing things. That's the point that I'm making. So that's why I'm asking the design philosophy of Killscore.
Yeah, so I'll just tell you exactly what Axel said to me. He said routing and optimizing pools in Fellowship will not be needed for the majority of players. With Fellowship, as it provides players with endless scaling difficulty and leaderboards to compete on, there will naturally come a point where routing becomes important for like the absolute most hardcore of players. Because like I kind of mentioned before, it's just the law of math. At some point, there will be an optimal route. But for most players, especially as you kind of go through that power fantasy and those sorts of things, there's some design things in there that we want people to have fun with. So for example, let's say I have a team that is more focused on AoE, right? We're going to pull things differently than a team that is more single target. There are actually some routes that we have in some of the dungeons already that will cater to different team compositions, if that makes sense. So if I have a team that's, going to do better with AoE, let's go this way. If I have a team that's better with, these kinds of pullings, then let's go that way. But I think, at the very, very, very end of the point, there will be an optimal route. It's just, it's part of what we're making for sure.
Yeah, that's the one concern that I have because it's just, again, it just becomes one thing that the tank kind of has to shoulder, and that usually has a tendency to get real toxic real fast if somebody's doing a different route than the optimal one, even though maybe they're more comfortable with that route. I usually see a tendency of people like, why'd you pull that? What's going on? It's just like it gets really hectic really friggin' fast when you do something unexpected.
Can I ask you a question? Like,
Go ahead.
Do you find that even when you're not at the highest difficulties of these things, like let's say you're, early on with something and you just need to clear it, but it's not super hard, is there still like a real desire for people to be taking the optimal routes?
Yes.
And
absolutely.
there is. Okay. And do you find that people...
From my experience, because the thing is, it's also important to see that you guys are launching a game that's going to have its own community, so I obviously can't speak for them because I don't know what the community is going to end up being. I'm talking in terms of my experience with specifically World of Warcraft Mythic Plus. Yeah. And the idea there is, which is the strangest thing to me, people don't actually want to do, and this is, again, it's my opinion, I'm not stating this as a fact, but from the experience that I've had, people don't actually want to do the dungeon. They just want the loot at the end. Like if they could go to, if there was like a big red button on the hub town, they would rather go there, press the button, and it would just like spew a piece of loot. They would rather do that than do the dungeon, and that is my experience with 99% of players. Most players don't actually want to be there. They don't actually want to do the dungeon. They're doing it because the dungeon gives them loot, which is a really strange, because I couldn't care less about the loot. I want to do the dungeon. And as a matter of fact, when it comes to kill score, I would rather be an overachiever. I would rather actually score me more for killing more things, and I will clean the whole dungeon, right? I'm the guy that I want the dungeon to take as long as it needs to, and I want to kill, I'm the Roomba. I want to kill everything along my way. And the moment that there's a mechanic in there that it's like, no, you want to limit how much you kill because it's going to take longer and you want to go faster, it's a weird thing for me. But people then, they expect you to always, no, you got to be the fastest. Even if it's let's say a Mythic +5, which is something super basic,
Okay.
People still want to like be out of there as fast as they can because they actually don't want the social interaction. They just want the loot at the end of the dungeon. They want to do their daily allotment of Mythic Plus and be done with it, and that's it. That's my experience. Unless you're like on a pre-made group of friends, then it's a completely different thing. But when you're on a pug, my experience has always been everybody wants to go as fast as possible, be done with it as fast as possible, almost like a visit to the dentist.
I totally understand what you mean. I do not think this is an issue unique to a single game. I think this is like what you're touching on is like.
I mean, I'm sure that considering that you've worked on the vision, I'm sure this is something you've seen on that community 100%, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen over the years that the human condition is exactly what you're saying. People think, well, this is what I say. People think or they say that they want everything given to them. And then if you do exactly that, they're like, oh, it's not fun anymore.
Yeah.
So like they can acknowledge that the journey is fun, but in the moment they don't want to do it, like you say. So I agree with you, but I think it's really interesting, and I think it's we'd be touching at a very big topic there if we're talking about like the state of online consciousness. But
this is why I don't go to TikTok. Now you know.
no, but this is exactly it, right? People think that they want everything given to them straight off the bat, but they also, when they do find themselves in that situation, they're not having fun anymore.
Yeah.
So we need to kind of figure out exactly how to navigate that situation, because some parts of both of those statements are true.
Yeah, exactly. So having said that, how complex do you think that the dungeons are going to get? Like, are there going to be dungeons that are going to be somewhat troubling to navigate? Are there going to be puzzles midway through the dungeon? Like,
so I can speak to what we have now. I would say the puzzles are in the boss mechanics.
Okay.
Which is really cool. And this is also something we haven't touched on, and we could talk about this for hours, but I want to. But the thing that being a hero-based game, so this is one of the things that we talk about, is because we're able to focus on very specific parts of our game, and for example, we don't have an open world, we don't have that leveling thing. We have dungeons.
You only have dungeons,
right? We have the ability to make a lot of dungeons. So as we go through that, I'm really excited to see how we evolve the complexity of them. We haven't even talked about raids yet, but we can.
I didn't even think you guys had raids.
We will have raids. So anyway, to my point, there's some really cool bosses that I'm excited to see how people interact with in the alpha. Some of them, I know that experienced players will understand all of the tells that the bosses have. They'll be like, okay, don't stand in that, do this, do that. There's some that are a bit more puzzling. When people, we're changing names of the dungeons all the time. For us, it's, anyway, it's the ice dungeon that people play. They will, there's a golem boss that you actually see in the trailer. There's some things you have to do that aren't immediately apparent from the get-go, that when we've given it to people blind, it takes them a couple of tries to figure out how it works. Some people, it takes it even more, but it's really interesting to see how people puzzle that out. I think once we really hit our stride with designing newer dungeons and we can be a bit more experimental with some of those things, I'm really excited to see just how much flexibility and, let's say, creativity we can have with those designs. It's gonna be cool.
No like traversal puzzles or anything like that. Traversing the dungeon is going to be pretty standard.
Pretty standard. I was going to say no platforming, but there actually is one dungeon where you can jump down different platforms, and if you fall off the side, you die. So saying that there's no platforming, but no like advanced kind of puzzle mechanics.
Yeah, you just go
in the traversal.
And there'll be trash packs along the way. You'll be able to skip some of them and all of that for the kill score. And I get the overall idea.
Yep.
So tell me about raids. I mean, you opened the door. like,
Ooh, okay. So raids, we don't have any raids in the alpha.
so you
and
lied
that's-
to me.
Okay. But the alpha was going to spoil it anyway. When you go to start a dungeon, you'll see that there's a tab for raids, I think. It was at least recently in there. There is a plan in the future to have raids. So exactly what those look like, we don't know, but we're really excited for what
Will they
that
will they
could
feature
afford
more
us.
than 4 players? Will it be like 8-player raids? Is that the idea? Or maybe
More than
even more?
more than four, yes. We
Yeah.
obviously, since we haven't designed them yet, we don't know what they'll end up looking like.
Okay.
So we're speculating along exactly what that could look like. But more players, bigger. So I've been really excited when we've talked about the possibility of doing those across, like, what would it look like if we did multiple sessions, you know? So I don't have to do it in one sitting, but it's big enough that can clear a bit, come back later with my group.
Oh,
Clear
so
a bit more.
when you're talking raids, because I guess this is because I play 14 now. These are very different things. Because like raids in 14 is basically you go into a room, there's a boss fight, you kill the boss, and you leave. That's a raid. You're talking like actual big sprawling dungeon with trash and yeah,
That's the hope.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Some of my favorite memories are from multi-session raids.
Yeah.
You know, like I think I brought up Nax earlier, right?
Yeah.
Like, I
You
have
go in, you clear
hugely
like a
fond
wing,
memories of that.
and then you come back next time, you clear the other wing, so on and so forth.
Love
yeah.
that. And again, I can't say that's
Yeah,
what
of
the design team
course.
are thinking here, but I loved that. So if they go that way, I'll be very, very, very excited. But yeah, I can say from a things I can confirm perspective, it's more players, bigger, and then we'll figure out the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously the default controls for this is going to be mouse and keyboard. That's kind of like the standard in this. Have you thought about gamepad support?
I actually brought this up with one of our designers earlier. Obviously, since we're a small team, we haven't implemented anything like that yet.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected it. I'm just talking about in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really passionate about accessibility. I want people to play our game. I want everyone to be able to play it. So if there is a way for controller support to happen, I will always advocate for it. Because I think it's important to a lot of people.
Yep.
It doesn't also just need to be that. I play a lot of stuff on Steam Deck. So I would love to be able to do that. But yeah, I need to kind of disclaim that we don't have it now. It's something that's, up on a whiteboard somewhere. Like, it would be great if we could do this.
It would be great if we could do
Right?
gamepad. Yeah.
But when you're a small team, you have to kind of reconcile that we want to make the game really, really fun. If we can do it, everyone's going to be really happy here if we can make it happen, for sure.
Yeah. And the follow-up question to that was like, is console something that you're considering in the future, or is that not a big priority right now?
It's not a big priority right now. But that, I mean, the mind does go there, right? Like,
Yeah, of course.
we're in that situation where it's like, what if? What if the people are excited enough about our game to start being like, hey, we want console crossplay? Like, wouldn't that be awesome? Like, yeah, of course that would. Like, for us, that'd be awesome too. But yeah, we gotta take it a step at a time. We're very early days, so there are no plans right now. I can safely say that. But would we want that? Of course.
Yeah, of course. It would just make sense. But yeah, I just wanted to set that up because I know that a lot of people in my channel also are console gamers and they're wondering about that. But looking at what I've seen from the game so far, I would imagine that in terms of hardware, this is not going to be a particularly demanding game, right?
No. So I've been extremely impressed with just how optimized it is. Obviously, here in the building, we're running on some pretty good machines.
Yeah.
I think the machine I'm on is a 4070 in it. Like, it's going to have no problem. But Victor, who's doing our optimization, he's running it on like a first series AMD CPU and like a 970, and it's hitting good frames.
What do you say? What do you call good frames on a 970? Good frames? What is this? 60? No, there's
I
no
think
way.
in some parts it's hitting 60, but he's saying it's comfortably above 30 on all of that.
Okay.
So
That is very well optimized if it's hitting
for
above
an alpha,
30. Yeah.
for an alpha that's super well optimized. Obviously, I've talked about other games I've worked on. It's always a constant thing, right? That you're having to do. But we want everyone to be able to play the game on a potato if they want. Like, we actually had someone from one of the websites. I can't remember what website it was. We were doing a preview for, and the journalist said to me, she was like, "Oh, I'm about to boot up the game, but the laptop I'm on is kind of old, and all the fans have stopped working." and I was like, "Okay, we have a problem." I was like, "Well, let's give it a go. Let's give it a go." And again, I can't remember what the specs of your laptop was, but obviously alarm bells started going off, and I was like, "Oh, okay, this is going to be a nightmare. We're going to get a bad review because because for whatever reason, the perception is that the game doesn't run."
Yeah.
Because how would it on a laptop with no fans? But she had no issues. And I was like, that is incredible. We're in an alpha that has no crashes on a laptop with no fans. Honestly, I couldn't be happier with how the game is running. That's really cool.
That is pretty impressive. I do like the art style. I feel like you guys probably still have a little bit of work to do on some of the animations, I feel like, but that's just because I'm super picky about animations. Like,
I will say there is work to be done everywhere.
Okay. Yeah.
The art, like, I constantly have the art team coming to me. They're like, "Oh, you put that in the trailer. It's not done. It's not done." I'm like, I know. But like,
but we have to show them something, right?
We have to show them something. Yeah. So the art team aren't.
It's like I think in terms of art direction, I don't think there's a major problem. Like, of course, you can polish up the textures and whatnot, but I think that the art direction, it's going for that timeless style of the stylized stuff, very familiar and similar to people who've played World of Warcraft. Obviously, I think you can definitely tell. But I think the art direction and the art style overall is actually not a problem. But I would like to see the animations be more fluid. That would be the one thing that I would point out.
Yeah, cool. I mean, that's again why I'm excited to talk to you after the alpha, just to kind of see, because I think what I'll probably ask you after you've had a chance to play it is, how do you feel after, like, how responsive does it feel? How does how much does the audio feedback, like, frame how you feel? How do the animations feel from the start? How does it feel once you've geared up, when you have more haste because it starts to feel really different? But everything is very early. So I kind of have to keep reminding myself that it looks, personal opinion now, I think it looks incredible for an alpha. And I am really excited to see how far it can be polished once we get to launch. Yeah. So, long way to go.
Well, that's pretty much all I had. I don't know if you want to bring up any more topics. I want to give you a chance to shout out the alpha and all that stuff that you guys got coming. I mean, I've mentioned it in my video and it's in your trailer as well, but
Yeah. I mean, it's good that we've done the first half of the podcast on our game. Now we can do the second half of the podcast on Dark Souls and Sekiro. So I think this will only end up being a 3-hour podcast. No, that would be cool. No, we can do that again another time.
Yeah.
But the alpha is coming really, really soon. So next Thursday for us, depending on when people are listening to this, that's the 15th of August. It's going to be 15th to the 20th. So we've got a busy weekend ahead.
I can imagine.
Yeah. We've already had a lot of signups, but if people haven't signed up yet, we're still taking them over on playfellowship.com. So if you haven't signed up, go and do that.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the description. Yeah.
Do you want a few keys to give out to people?
I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, if you guys want to give out keys, sure.
Okay.
I can give
so
away some
I will.
keys.
I'll DM you some keys, and you can figure out a way to get them out to some people. But we can do that. But it's going to be a very busy time.
It is
There
important
is
to mention that this alpha is under NDA, right? There's no streaming, no capture,
it
no
is.
nothing.
Yes, so no capture. Obviously, people will do like reactions and they can give their own takes on what they
Yeah.
experienced, but they won't be able to use any of their captured footage. We have obviously the trailer that has some footage in it. There's some screenshots. I will say, and I'm doing this from, I guess, a content creator perspective, there is no streaming during the alpha, but, and I haven't told anyone this yet publicly, we will be doing a stream on Friday the 16th, which people could capture.
You can use footage from the stream that you guys are doing on Friday, is what you're saying?
I mean, we aren't expressly saying that people can't. So, if I'm putting up a stream and it happens to be saved as a VOD on our YouTube and also available on our Twitch channel, one might assume that that could be chopped into various bits and pieces.
Okay. Well,
Just saying.
that is going to be it for today's episode of the Cast. Hamish, thank you very much for your time and for talking to us early about Fellowship. I know that it's sometimes hard to talk about the games at an early stage, so I really appreciate that you were willing to do that. And if you guys enjoyed the podcast, do make sure to hit the like, subscribe, bell notification icon, all that stuff. And if you are curious about Fellowship, sign up for the alpha. There's going to be a link in the description where you guys can go ahead and go do that. And yeah, that's going to be it. We'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe. Peace out.